Start by creating the beautiful flower center. And for that, I have got my yellow floral tape. I have got my black permanent marker, a ruler. I've got my piece of doublette. I've got a wire cutter, my 18 gauge wire cut down to 40 centimeter length. You can use whatever length you want. And obviously my tacky glue and some scissors. So for this flower, I have used a piece of doublette that is 20 centimeters by the 25 height of the fold. And generally, if you cut like this, you'll be able to get enough petals for 2 flowers. So I'm not going to be using this for a second flower. So I'm going to be using this now to cut a piece off for my center. But if you were going to be making 2 flowers, this fold will give you 2 sets of petals. So I'm just going to fold this in half a few times. And I'm going to cut out 3 centimeters. So I'm just going to cut that now. And then I'm going to do another 3 centimeters for the height. I'm just going to cut all of the paper for the petals now as well. So 3 centimeter will be for our first petal strip. 4 centimeters for the second. And 5 centimeters for the third. So now if you're using this to cut 2 sets of petals, it'll give you all of these, the 3, 4, and 5 strip, and then there should be a 1 centimeter piece left over at the bottom, which you're going to need as well. So I'm just going to measure out that 1 centimeter now, and then just cut that off ready to go when I need it. So let's just set these 3 aside, the 5, the 4, and the 3, and this little 1 piece. So that's ready to go. So for our petal, for our flower center, we're using a piece of doublette that is 3 centimeters tall by 15 centimeters wide. So I'm going to measure out my 15. So again, I've got this little piece left over. I'll set that aside. So there's my 15 centimeters. We're not outstretching this. I'm going to grab a piece of floral tape the same length. So this floral tape is already 1 centimeter tall. So I'm just going to measure a piece. It doesn't matter if it's longer. I can always trim it down. I'm not stretching this out either. So I'm just going to fold it in half. I'm just going to cut off this excess here. Just make sure that it fits. Yeah, that's great. So I'm going to keep this piece for a moment. You just want to like really make sure that that line is well defined. So I'm just going to really push down on that fold line. I'm then going to open it out. So now you can see that fold line right there. I'm going to be placing some tacky glue in there. So now I don't want a lot of tacky glue because we're going to be finally fringing this, so we don't want it to be too clumped with glue. So I'm going to just sort of spread it in a sort of circular motion, just because I want to make sure that that glue is reaching the top and the bottom edge of this tape. We want it to glue nicely onto that paper, and we want it to grab the both edges really, really well. So I'm just going to take a minute, smoothing it out. So you can see there's no like big pools of glue. We want it as fine a coat as possible. And then I'm just going to lift that out of that glue there. And then bring in my paper. And I'm just going to clean some of this glue off my fingers as well. I'm going to take my paper and I'm going to place it in right there on that line. Take your time. Make sure you get it in the right position. So I'm just going to bring that down a little bit just so that I know it's lined up really well. Once that's good to go, I'll press it down and then fold this piece over. It should go over quite comfortably. And then I'm just going to press down. I'm going to trim off that edge. And I really just, even if you use the cap of your glue, whatever you need to use, and just press down to make sure that that tape is glued on there really, really well. It's going to be crucial when you come to fringing this. And make sure that no glue is squeezing out either. So I'm just going to turn it over and do the same on this side. Okay. We're now going to create another fold. So it's going to be really, really small. But basically, I'm just going to take this yellow section now and fold it down onto itself, just like that. So we're not folding down onto the white, we're just folding over on this yellow section. And as before, once that is done, you want to make sure that that crease line is well established. So just press down really firmly. So now the side that you've glued down is going to be the front of your strip, and this side with a single layer will be the back of the strip. So I'm going to open that out again carefully. And as before, I'm just going to go in with my tacky glue again. And really just make sure that everything is going to be glued down really, really well. And I'm sort of rubbing off most of that glue because I don't want it to be very gluey. I just want to make sure that that top edge is going to be glued down very well. And now we'll go back to gluing this down. And it should go quite easily now because that line has been placed into the paper. So it should be quite a simple, just fold over and glue down. So again, I'm just going to take a moment here. I'm going to grab my cap again, and I'm just going to sort of roll over that, just to make sure that any of the paper that's not stuck down will be stuck down, and also to make sure that if there's any sort of bigger glue deposits in there, they will just come out and allow the strip to dry more evenly. Okay, that looks great. I'm just going to clean off, I mean, this glue, little bits of glue that stick on here are easy enough just to scrape off. And so there's our strip. I'm just going to let it tack up for a moment. Keep checking on it because it might need to be pushed down in some parts. But while that is happening, I'm taking my wire and I'm going to use this little piece here. So as I said, this piece now is 1 centimeter tall. I'm going to outstretch this a little bit on the end here. And then I'm going to add a little bit of tacky glue. You don't need very much. We're only doing about 1 to 2 rolls at the most around the tip of this wire so that it blends in nicely with the stamen. So I'm just going to spread that glue on here. I'm bringing in my wire, and this paper is going to match up with the top of my wire. I'm going to fold it over. Just try to get a little bit more neatly. I'm going to fold it over, and 1, 2 rolls. That's it. I'm going to cut that off. And then I'm just going to secure that in. So we're not covering the top of this wire because we're going to be bending it over. So now about 1/2 centimeter bend. So I take halfway, go halfway here, and I'm going to bend it around to create a little hook. Just like that. Ready to be attached to our center, well, to our fringing. The first thing I'm going to do now is measure 5 centimeters from the end here, and I'm going to cut that off. So that leaves me with a 10 centimeter strip. And then I'm going to measure 4 centimeters from the end of the strip and make a line. Then with my black marker, you could also use a dark brown. You could use a nice deep burgundy color for this as well, or deep magenta. I'm just going to be adding a bit of, in fact, it might be easier to do it with the grain of the paper. Adding a little bit of a black line just beneath that yellow stamen tips. It's going to give some beautiful definition to the center. And then flip it over. I'm just going to put a line down there so I know that's my 4 centimeters, and here as well. And we're going to do the same thing, just adding that black line. You'll do the same on this piece. So on this piece now, I'm doing some little black squares. They are just a few little millimeters apart. It doesn't really matter how far apart they are. They're just going to be intermittent across the strip, and they don't go all the way to the top. There should be like a little bit of a yellow tip still remaining. So you can go right up until that tip and then do the same on the back. So I'm just going to do like a little square and color it in. They don't have to match. And then on this one, from the 4 centimeters, it's the same thing, just doing little squares. Flip it over, and the same on this side. Is we're going to be measuring out 2 centimeters from the yellow tip down. So that puts me to over here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to, from that mark, we're just going to cut up at a bit of a gradient, a gentle gradient, and this is going to give us a nice small compacted wrap and reduce the bulk. So starting at this end, I'm just cutting down into that bit of the black and just cut as fine a fringe as possible. So we're not cutting very far down, it's just really shallow little cuts, just to cut into the yellow and a little bit into the black, like that. So these aren't very long strips, so you can take your time. And it's important that you make sure that the strip is dried well enough, because if it's not, this yellow is going to start to lift up and shift around and do all kinds of things, which you don't want to happen. So you can see as I'm trimming now, there's no glue spilling out, which is great. None of the floral tape is lifting up. And it's already, I've used it before, using floral tape as stamen tips, because it's it gives a slightly different sheen and texture to paper, for example. So when you're looking at it, it's quite distinctively different and visually different. So I enjoy using things like that as stamen tips. It makes just a nice alternative. And I think with all these types of elements, if you can use different things and create just a bit of more of a visual story with the flower, it just gives a much more natural and realistic end result. Okay, that one's done. And like I said, there is a front and a back side, so the back will be a lot flatter. The front has got more of the rounded pollen tips. So there's the one done, and I'm going to do the same for this, which I'll just do off camera. Now done, and we're going to set that aside for later on when we are applying our petals. But for now, this one, we're going to be placing it onto our wire. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip it over, and I'm going to attach the side that is got the one layer of floral tape. That's going to be my inside. I'm going to just move a few pieces to the side like that, creates a little bit of a gap. I'm going to place my wire inside, and then I'm going to clamp that down. So once that's clamped on, it's going to ensure that this fringing is not going to come off. It's going to stay nice and stable on the wire. So I'm just going to add a little bit of tacky glue now, and I'm not adding too much, just a couple dots along that black section, the midpoint, and the bottom. And then we're just going to wind it on, and I'm not stretching out the center at all. I'm just making sure that those top, like right over here, stays nice and even. So I can actually just hold my finger there and just roll it up nice and evenly. Obviously the base is going to get narrower, so I'm just going to keep turning, turning, turning until I get to that section, that 4 centimeter section with the black in the stamen, and that part. So I've made my little line there, so I know that from that part I'm now going to compact, but I'm also now going to lift this. You could cut it off at that point and attach it slightly higher, but I'm going to just lift it and then attach it. So I'm going to just angle it up a little bit. So look from the top, I'm slightly angling it up. So almost the base of these stamen are in line with the top of these ones, just to create a nice bit of a border. And again, not stretching it, just gluing it all at the same height. And then glue it down, and then compact just below that black section there. Just give it a good press. So this will just help those little stamens to splay open. I'm just going to I think I need to add a little bit more tacky glue here, just at the very end. I'm just going to place it on my stamen and then bring that around and glue it down. And I'm just going to press everything just for a moment, just to make sure that everything's nice and compacted on there. And I've got this little awl that you can just sort of open up those little center pieces a little bit. The black really pops through as well that we did at the base of the stamen. And then for these as well, I'm just going to ruffle them up a little bit so they're not so perfect. Just move them a little around and create a little bit of dimension. So you can see how pretty and impactful that is. A nice yellow central cluster, and then these ones with a little bit of black on them, just giving a nice bit of distinction to the outer ring of the stamen. So that's our center done, quick and simple. And we're going to set that aside and work on our petals. We're ready now to dive into petals, and for that I've got my 3 strips here, the 5 centimeter, which I've fully outstretched to the point where it cannot stretch anymore. My 4 centimeter tall strip also outstretched, and my 3 centimeter strip, which we're going to stretch out. And you can almost hear and feel when it's stretched out enough. So I know if I keep stretching out, it's going to tear the strip, so we don't want to do that. But you can see how nice and wide that piece is now. I've also, this is going to be freehand cut, but for those who are not too comfortable or confident yet with freehand cutting, I'm including these hand-drawn templates for you. So there are 2 different templates you'll see. I mean, this one is longer than the strip, but it's just you can always position it lower down to give you a bit of variety if you wanted sort of different width petal cuts. So there's that for the first strip. For the second strip, it'll be this heart-shaped petal, and then for the third strip, it'll be this sort of wavy kind of shaped petal. So that's if you need some guidance and want to use templates, but this is going to be such an easy process to do freehand cut. So I'm going to set these two strips, the two larger strips, aside for a moment and focus on the inner ruffled strip. And this strip is going to be receiving more color than these two. So with the flower, it kind of goes from a dark, a sort of concentrated color to a much more faded color, meaning less color on the strip. So that's just the way to think about these strips. And then I'm going to also be applying the markers to the strip for the first one, and then we'll be doing a different technique for these two. So the first thing I'm going to do is just sort of fold it in half and in half again. I want to just sort of get an idea, because each strip is going to be about 1 centimeter wide. So I'm going to just lay that down for a moment, place my ruler here, and I'm going to just mark up every 1 centimeter just to give me an idea of where the petals are going to be. This is just going to help me with my coloration. I don't need to do all the way through, it's just enough to give me a start. So I can now clearly see where all those petals are going to be. And what we want to do is we want to just concentrate color on the edges. I'm not trying to color this entire petal in. We want some white of it still, but we want to create beautiful sort of edges to these petals. And obviously variety is going to be key in this as well. So I'm going to start out with my broad tip, and on that line there where you can see our first petal being marked out, I'm just going to take the marker and sort of, not pressing hard, just gently sort of going up on that line. And I'll do the same here, maybe just do a little bit of a finer line. Just on all those lines. This is not a technique that I'm really very familiar with. I've only just sort of done it now for this class, but it's a very interesting way to color the paper. And so I'm just trying to lay that color on. If I don't get perfectly on each little section, it's okay. I just want to kind of keep my spacing a little bit consistent. And now I'm going to go in and just sort of add some color in from the base. So I'm just taking my broad marker and just gently brushing it up onto the petal. I haven't tried this with water. I'm assuming that the color will bleed differently with the water. The color may look different as well. Using some 180 gram, I more than likely would have used water as opposed to the alcohol, just because with doublette it does tend to delaminate if it gets too saturated. And I also wanted something that would dry quicker. So I'm just going to make sure that's all done. And then I'm going to just kind of, maybe with a thinner tip, just grab some of those lines a little bit more. Some from the top, So I'm going to use a dropper. I'm going to give that a try. And I've got some little cotton pads here. Should I want to dab up any of that alcohol if there's too much. I also got my bleach here on standby. And I'm working on a non-porous surface. This is a glass cutting board. And I've also got a board that is wrapped in some cellophane, which is from an envelope that I got. To use as well. So anything that's non-porous is going to be great in helping you control the coloration. So that's what you want to use. I'm going to just get a little bit of alcohol in here and then bring this forward, and I'm going to pick some up in the dropper and then just drop some like that, and just maybe on each of those little lines, and from some I'll do from the top. I definitely want this color to bleed into blend. If you don't have a dropper, you could also just use your paintbrush, not a problem. Okay, so that looks really nice. I like the coloration. So I'm just going to move this aside for a moment and grab one of these little cotton pads and add some here just to clean up my surface. Let's just have a look. I'm happy with how that looks. I think it's quite a nice mixture of purple and the white. So I'm happy with that. I'm going to just set it aside for a moment. Now this strip, let's just clean that up. Doesn't really matter that I've got some on there. As I said, you can always use the bleach. I'll show you on that little spot right now, actually. So I'm going to take some of this, and I'm going to just maybe use my little awl here. If I tap it on there like that, you'll see now it will just completely remove that color. So there you go. It's going to remove any color. So on this strip, for example, if you decided that you wanted just some more white in there, you could just take some of your bleach and just sort of create lines. And you can see already how it's lifting that color. So let's just do a little bit over here. It also turns it to a bit of a purpley hue. It will change this color slightly. Not a train smash. But that's how to use bleach. It just completely eliminates the color, so you really can't go too wrong. So that's looking great. I think if you wanted to go in with a few more sort of darker bits, you could go in afterwards and just add a little bit of darker color. So with this coloring technique, it really is just about experimentation. I really love the deep magenta colors that is picking up over there. It's very, very cool. So if you wanted to now go over and create a little bit more depth, you can do that. I would wait until this is fully dried because the marker doesn't tend to pick up too well while it's still damp. Alright, so we'll come back to that in a moment. With my second strip now, the petals are 2 centimeters in width. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to fold it in half, fold it in half again, and then just mark out the 2 centimeters. I mean, you don't have to do this. It's just a guide, which I think could be quite useful. So I'm doing my 2 centimeters here. And there we go. Now for this one, I'm going to do something slightly different. I'm going to take my little cap here, and then I'm going to take some of this color. I'm going to add some to the cap. Some of my vivid reddish purple as well. And this is what I love about this technique, is just you can get color down. It doesn't matter if it's going to dry on the plastic. It's perfectly fine. It's going to just sort of reactivate when you add the rubbing alcohol to it. So it really is just a lovely way to paint. So I'll set those aside for now, bring this back in, and I'm just going to pick up some rubbing alcohol, and I'm going to just put a little bit, dab excess off on my cotton pad, pick up some of this magenta, and for right now I'm just going to again just go up the sides, just dab on the color and brush up from the base. So just brush up on the base. Let's do all along the strip first. The less rubbing alcohol on your brush, the more intense the color, and then the more rubbing alcohol, obviously, the more muted the color, which is great. So I'm just going to brush it up ever so slightly. Just let that color bleed up a little bit, like that. And let's go on this side as well. So I'm just going to tap the base of that petal strip. Remember, this strip has got less intense color, so it'll be more of a white strip than seeing color. Which is why I'm also adding the color like this, so that it gives me a much softer tone. Okay, and once that's done, you can just sort of go along and just help the color bleed up a little bit, again on those sections where the petals are being demarcated. So maybe I'll go up with a bit of the lighter color. Just letting that color bleed up, just like that, so it gives a very soft transition. So on here now you can see the bleed has stopped there. Just take your rubbing alcohol and just push that color up, and you see it will soften that harsh line and just give you a nice softer blend. I'm going to go in from the top on some of these as well, just to create a little bit of interest. There we go. And any of those sort of, actually I'll leave that there, that's cool. So on this one now I'm going to blend that line a bit more so it's not so harsh. You don't want to see sort of very obvious lines. You want it to be very soft and gradual shift in color. Okay, that's looking great. I'm going to tap some of these edges here. Again, I don't want it to be identical. I want the entire coloration to look very organic. So I'm just blending that color in, blending this little line here. And also what you can do is add some rubbing alcohol all to your strip. So once I've added rubbing alcohol, go in with your color and just tap it on somewhere and it will just bleed. Just press and just like sort of tap the color in. Also gives a really nice blend. Okay, I'm happy with that. I just want to blend this out a little bit more. I just don't want those harsh lines there. And also once you start cutting these petals out, they're going to look very different. So there's that one. So you can see the difference between the coloration. Very subtle on this one, quite intense on the inner one. So if you wanted to go back and add some deeper color, you absolutely can. So just pick up some color here. I'm not even putting any more alcohol on. I'm just sort of brushing up intermittently along that strip. And you can see it'll dispense a little bit of darker color. Picking up just some of the color that's caught up in the side here of this little lid and brushing that up. So that's great. For the third strip, these are 3 centimeters wide, these petals. So I'm going to do the same. This time around, I'm going to measure out my 3 centimeters, fold it across, and then fold that end piece there like that. So there you go, we've got some areas to work with. And also now, this is going to have even less color. So we're aiming for just really the tops and nothing really in the middle of the petal. So I'm going to turn this over just because this doesn't go on when there is rubbing alcohol on there. So I'm just going to use a clean surface now just to dispense some color. Actually, I could use here as well. And I'm just going to do the same. I'm just going to brush up a little bit color on the base. turn it over, pick up some of that color. I'm just using the side of my brush just to tap the side here of the petal. So not much contact at all with the paper. Okay. And then we're going to just bleed the color down a little bit. So I'm really just muting this now. We're going to, at the end, go in with this darker color and just edge all the petals. It's a bit of a time-consuming process, but really is quite beautiful. So I'm just going in now and just blending those lines. Flip it over. Now, before I'm like completely done with the strip, I'm going to compare it to my middle strip, just to see if the color is a lot more muted, which I can see it is. But if on this point now you find they look too similar in terms of their coloration, you can go in now with your bleach. So I will take a little bit of this bleach. I'm going to dispense a little bit over here. And I'm going to pick some up. Again, rubbing some off because I don't want too much on. And I'm going to brush up on some of the areas I feel that might be too dark in color. So you're going to see now it will start to lift that color up. Maybe over here. As it starts to dry, the color is going to be a lot more lighter. So I think that looks good because this strip definitely, to me, looks darker in color. So that's great. And so I think I'm happy with that. I don't think any more needs to be done. I'm going to set that one aside to dry as well. And then clean up is super easy. I'm just going to use the remainder of this rubbing alcohol and just clean my surface. So let's take a look at our first strip, which will now be ready to cut. So I'm going to fold it in half a few times. Once and twice. So now you can see this is the edge with all the folded paper. This is the open side. So I'm going to start cutting my petals from the open side. On each of the strips, I'll do the same thing. Grabbing my ruler, I'm going to place it along the bottom. Actually, let me just stretch it out a little bit more again. Just give it a little bit more stretch. Adding the rubbing alcohol can tend to cause a little bit of shrinkage, so just stretch it out a little bit. I'm going to fold it in half. And then fold it in half again. Make sure everything's lined up. It will help with the cutting. Add my ruler. And I cut down every 1 centimeter. And then on this end one now, you can cut down. So I'm going to be leaving a base of about 1/2 centimeter. So not a huge wide base. And if some of your petals are slightly wider, that's not a problem. Variety is really going to be key in creating a beautiful organic look. Okay, so this side now, I'm just going to trim this side as well a little bit down. Okay, so now when it comes to cutting, I am going to start by rounding off the one edge, and then just below that edge, I'm going to cut down to a taper. So basically it's just giving me that curve of the petal, flip it over, cut that edge round as well, so with my rounded edge. From here now, I'm going to cut again, cutting in. So basically what it's giving me is a tapered petal shape. You see a narrower base. But these little pieces here we're going to leave on. It's just going to add a lovely bit of visual interest and add a few little interesting petals to our center. And then I'm just going to cut in, almost like you would with a peony petal, just create a little bit of shaping. They're all going to be very different. So on this one as well, we're going to cut around, cut down to a taper, flip it over, round that edge, and then cut down to a taper. And on this one, I might just do a little snip in the top like that. This one again, cut around, and then cut down to a taper, flip it over. I'm going to cut this one a little bit narrower, so it's a little bit more pointy, and then cut down at a taper. This one as well, cut around, cut down to a taper. And then I might just cut a little bit off the inside like that. I don't want any sharp edges, so I'm just going to cut that more rounded. So you can see why it's important to freehand cut these strips, because this is just so random in cutting that a template would make it a little bit too uniform, and you don't want it to look uniform. The center is very organic looking, so I'm just going to cut in like that. So really, when you are cutting these, just think of peony petals, just got interesting little notches cut in. You don't have to overthink it too much. So I'm just going to cut around here. And then also, cutting them in strips like this means that you're cutting out a lot of petals in one go. So it really just speeds up the process, which is great. So this one I'm going to leave as is. And then for my last one, I'm going to cut around, cut in, and then cut down. I might just do a little notch or something at the top of that one. So let's just move that out the way. And then open up the strip. And we've got just a host of beautiful petals. Our second strip, we're going to fold in half. So there's this darker edge I'm going to use as my base. I'm going to fold it in half and fold it in half again. Line up that strip. So again, my open end is this side. Let's just stretch it as well. and 2 centimeters. I'll leave that one there because it's about the right width. Cut down. Also leaving a small base. And now these ones are going to be cut into a heart shape. Whoops. I cut that into a heart shape. And the same thing, you're going to cut around and cut down to create that petal shape. So I'm just going to cut around to there. And again, you're going to leave those little pieces on. You can cut around, cut down, cut around, cut down, and then you can go in and do your little, and create a little notch as well. Again, you want a bit of variety on the ends of these. You don't want them all to look super perfect. So we're going to cut around, cut down, and there's our second strip of petals. And our third strip, I'm going to also just stretch it out a little bit and fold it twice. And these are 3 centimeters each. So now I'm going to leave that as one petal. I'm going to grab my scalloped pinking shears and I'm going to just cut these two for now. So I'm just going to cut up and just add a bit of a scalloped edge. Actually, it's not my scalloped ones. Let's go around. Like that. And then on this one, because it's folded, I'm going to open it up. You can see they're slightly narrower than the others, and that's perfectly fine. And these I'll just cut individually. This one. I will leave that one as is. So now if you wanted to go in with these strips and just add a few little notches, you can, just randomly. Just any that look too sort of flat, I'm just going to add a couple little notches. That's perfect. And then the same for this one. Just maybe add a little notch here and there. see. So like on this one now, I'll just add a little notch there. A little notch. Yeah, it's a lovely little detail to add. Before we do any shaping to these petals, we're going to have to add a little bit of a border to each of these petals. So not these little cut pieces in between, but just the main petals. And it's a bit of a laborious task, but I think that it really just gives that beautiful, distinctive double click cosmos appearance. And for that, I'm just going to be using the finer tip of this marker. And because these are quite small, I'm literally just going to be kind of tracing around the petal shape. So almost like I want to create a template, I'm just tracing around the petal. So you can see the little mark on my board from where I'm outlining it. So I'm just sort of moving these other little petals aside. I'm placing my finger on the middle of that petal to hold it down, and I'm just gently adding a bit of a darker edging to the petals, and then taking that color all the way down. So there's two done. It doesn't have to be consistent. It can be a little bit sort of staggered, if you will, around. It doesn't be a solid line is what I'm saying. And we're just going to go around each of them. So you can see these few that I've done as opposed to ones I haven't done. It just gives a lovely bit of an edging to them. So I'll show you what that looks like. You can see compared to the ones that haven't been done. Okay, I found that switching over to the broader tip was a lot easier at the end. But there's the one strip done. We're going to do the same for the second strip. We are literally just outlining the petal. So just going around doing the outline. Okay, second row done. Sorry, second strip done. Then on the third strip, we're not going all the way down the sides. We're literally just going to be getting the top of those petals. So I'm just going to hold it while I'm doing it. I'm going just a little bit down the side and then just tapping or brushing some color onto that edge of the petal. So I'm just going to hold it there and then just brush down some of that color. On this strip, it's super subtle. But the marker just really picks up all the beautiful shaping from the top of the petal. So my window faces a very busy little road in our suburb, and so it's just there's never really a moment when there's not the sound of cars and people and activity happening, and oftentimes you'll hear birds and ducks and all kinds of things because I live right across from a green belt. So there's lots of activity and noise and stuff going on in the background, which is, yeah, gives a very interesting sound to everything. And plus I'm at home now with I've got two teenagers who are homeschooled, and so they are like around and busy and doing things, and it's, yeah, a lot of sound and noise, which is great. Okay, so now we're going to be shaping up these strips. So for this inner strip, I'm going to just, I mean, there isn't much stretch left in these things. So I'm just going to, you can see, just gently, just, I'm not even trying to cup it. I'm just sort of, almost like I'm going to tear it. I'm turning one way, and then on this one, I'm going to turn, like tear towards my left, and then this one I'm going to tear almost like towards my right. Just to create a little bit of shape on these petals. Nothing too drastic. Again, I love the effect of these hand cut petals, freehand cut, just because it just gives such a lovely variety. Now I'm going to gather, I'm keeping the base even. I'm gathering some petals in, and I'm just going to twist the bottom of that petal cluster. I'm not trying to ruin any of my shaping at the top here. I just want to compact the bases of those petals. So I'm just going to roll it quite firmly between my fingers here. And so when I open it up, you can see how it's compacted the base of those petals. So it's very simple. I mean, compared to this part that hasn't been done, it just gives us a lovely additional shaping to the strip. And when you normally cut strips of petals, it can look very monotonous and very consistent. So this way just gives a little bit of, it looks like you've cut each individual petal, and shaped each one by hand, so it just gives a much more organic look. So I'm just going to do that side and then do this last section. Again, just keeping that base even, because I don't want to touch any of the top of that petal, just the bases. Okay, so there's my first row done. For these ones, I am going to be breaking them into sets. So I'm going to do sets of 3. So I'm going to just, between these two, you can see this section here in the middle, it's cut in half. I'm literally going to tear that. So there's 3 petals there, 3 there, 3, and there'll be one that has 4. Alternatively, you can always just tear this one off and use it separately. But what we're going to do is we're going to just sort of set these back, twist them back and forward. Be aware that the bases are more narrow now, so don't want to tear it off. Just twisting them back and forth. And then we're going to open them out. So now they're a lot less papery and got a really nice sort of shaping to it. And I'm going to just, texture to it. And I'm going to just create some lines on that petal. And then you can just gently cup it open as well. So just do this one as well. Open it out. Okay, so we want to now, on each of these ones, we want to narrow this strip. So what we're going to do is I'm going to start by taking this little piece here. This is why I left them on as well, because it adds a nice bit of visual interest. I'm going to fold that back. So it's now sitting behind that petal, like that. I'm then going to stretch out the base a little bit and then create a pleat. So I'm just doing a little, just see here. I'm taking this side and I'm just folding it across to create a little bit of a pleat in the petal. So when I open it up, I've got that little fold there. I'm going to add a little bit of hot glue and that fold and then press it down. So now it's given me this little pleat. I'll do the same for these petals as well quickly. So there's my little fold. Add some hot glue. This gives some nice structure to the petal. It also gives a really nice shaping to it as well. And fold this one. They don't have to be perfect. You just want to get a little pleat, that's all. Okay, so far it looks like that. And then with these sections here, I'm going to take a little bit of hot glue right here, and I'm going to bring this petal across by pushing these 2 little pieces to the back. So I'm going to just pleat these together. So these are now almost fan, like in a fan shape. They are attached, and these little pieces now at the back. You can do a reverse of that as well by just adding a little dot of glue there, and then these 2 pieces will be in the front, but I'm going to bring this petal across and attach it there, and then this little piece here. So this one I glued to the back of that petal, this one I'll glue to the front. So I'm just going to take a little bit of hot glue and fold it across. So now I've got these little pieces sitting in front of the petal. So I'm just going to trim off this hot glue. I apologize for that truck in the background. So there's our petal set, and how amazing to go from a base that was that long to that small. And that's how we're going to do all of them. So with this one that's got the 4, I think I'm just going to tear this one off. So I've got my 3, and then I'm just going to do this one separately and then set it aside so that I can glue it on its own. So I'm going to stretch it out a little bit. I haven't cut any spare petals, so I'm very mindful of being quite gentle. So now with this one, I'm going to take one of these and set it to the front of the petal. I still want to create that little pleat. And then this one I'll glue to the back. So you can see now, just got something very interesting to attach. So you'll go ahead and get all those done the same way. And then for the last one, the last strip, we're going to be breaking these off, and we are going to be shaping them up separately. So each one will come off, and I'm going to just, again, just twist this in my hands a few times, just rolling it back and forth, open it out. And I'm just going to shape that up. And as before, these are also getting pleats, except I'm going from, so let me just fold it in half so I can get the center of this petal. Okay, so there's the center right there. I'm going to just bring this into a fold, and let me just glue it down so I can show you. So I've brought it in. I can just cut that little torn off piece there. So now I've brought it in as a fold to that center line. So you can see that. I'm going to do one on the other side as well. So this one's going to meet that one. So let's just go a little bit of hot glue there. I'm going to just press it down. Okay, so I've got a petal that looks like that now with 2 pleats on either side. There's the back. You can see those pleats. And then bring it in. So I'm going to add a little bit of hot glue right here in the center of those 2 pleats. And right at the very base, I'm going to bring it together. And then obviously open that out so that it creates a really beautiful petal. And as I said, this could be really beautiful to use if you want to just make an 8-petal cosmos as well. So that's the shaping. Let's just do one more of those together. So I'm just going to go back and forth, open it out a little bit, maybe outstretch it gently, add a few lines for some texture and break down the paper. I'm going to kind of mark out the center of my petal. And then on this little section now, I'm going to create a pleat that goes to the center of the petal. So once I've glued it down, it gets glued to that center line. So let's glue it down. So now there's a pleat like that on the center of my petal. And on this half, I'm going to do another pleat to meet that one. And this is just a single layer of doublette. We haven't laminated it again to give it a lot of structure. So doing these little things and using the hot glue is going to add a lot of structure. And then what I'm going to do is add a little drop of hot glue right in the center of those two pleats, and turning it around, I'm going to just fold it together to create a nice little compact base, and then open it up. Actually twist the base as well, and then open up that petal. And you've got those little channels in there, which is great. So that's how we're going to shape up all of our petals, and I love the color variation as well. So when we come back, all these will be done and we can start assembling them onto our flower. Okay, so all our petals are done. I have got back my little piece of fringing here. I've got my center, and we're going to be adding our first row of petals. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just, when I'm adding it to my center, I'm going to, so the center here, let's just make a note. The center, the white part, is 1.5 centimeters. So I'm going to apply this fringing on that part right there at the base. So the bases are all meeting for about 2 wraps. So I'm going to add my hot glue. And I'm just going to just bend that up a little bit to make it easier. I've done about 2 wraps now. I'm going to slot in this little fringe section, which I'm going to cut down. So from stamen tip to end, it's about 1.3 centimeters. I could even cut it down a bit more. And then that is going to be placed in here. So I've done my 2 wraps where the bases are all lined up. I'm now going to lift this slightly so the fringing is about halfway in between this section here. So I'm going to add my hot glue here. And the first thing I'm going to do is just set in that fringing. And I want it to be about in line with the fringe that's already sticking up. So I'm just going to go around here. And add that on. So now I'm going to take my strip and I'm just going to now lift it a little bit higher to about halfway. So these petals are now taller than the first row that we put on, the first sort of wrap. I'm going to just get this glued down. Going to remove the glue strands as well. And now I'm going to keep wrapping. So the key with this strip is that you don't want to outstretch it, because the petals have been narrowed. If you pull it out, it just spreads the petals too much, which you don't want. You want them quite closely clustered. So try not to stretch out that strip at all. We're just gluing it down. I'm not stretching it. I want it to stay nice and compacted and full. And the great thing about using the hot glue for this is that it creates a little bit of bulk as well. We've really thinned out this doublet, so this just adds a nice bit of fullness to the flower, which using tacky glue wouldn't do. So I'm just going to take a minute before I continue just to press everything down. And I'm being mindful to keep the base of these petals all at the same height. So now I'm going to add some glue onto the flower itself instead of the strip, because it's a little bit tricky when there's so little paper left. So I'm just going to gently turn that. I'm going to turn it upside down and glue that on. Get rid of any excess hot glue. And again, I'm going to take a moment to press everything down really well. So there's our center petals on, and you can see now the first few little wraps were in line with that, the white of the center, and then this has been moved up a little bit, about halfway up, just to create a little bit of shorter petals right against the center, and then longer petals going up. Again, creating variety within the strip. So there's our first layer on. Get rid of all this glue. I'm just going to grab my 3 petal sets. And here's my single one that I have as well. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so I've got 5 sets of 3 and then 1 individual petal. And these now are going to be placed down onto that base. So they're going to be a little bit lower and placed onto the base of that flower. So I'm going to take a bit of hot glue and just really picking anywhere, I'm going to add it to that base and glue it around. So you can see this row is not standing up too much higher than my inner row. This little piece sticking out here, I'm just going to glue down. I'm going to take another one, add a little bit of hot glue, and attach it next to, slightly overlapping those petals so it almost forms like a complete circle. So I'm just going to put that one in there. Open it out a little bit. I'm just going to see where I've got some sort of spacing that I'd like to cover up and close in. So I can see that maybe I'm going to add my other 3 here. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to tear these apart So I'll have 4 loose ones. And then use these individual ones to fill in the gaps. So I can see I've got a gap over here. So I'll place one in there. You don't have to use all these petals. If you find you don't have any gaps, you don't need to utilize it at all, these other petals. So I'm just going to take a look from the top. Okay, so add that one there. And then I'm just going to add this one. You can see it's a bit of a gap over here. So I'm just going to add this one here. So now with these little pieces, you can just sort of take them and twist them a little bit. They're not so sharp and papery. And they just really add a lovely element. Same in the center. You can see these little spiky petals. It just gives it a lovely bit of lushness without a lot of effort. So now what I'm going to do is I can see that I've got quite a few petals on here. And I've got a little bit of gaps on this side. So I'm going to start there with my narrower petals. So let's just take all of those out. So I can see I'd cut some wider that were the 3 centimeters, and there were some that were cut slightly narrower. So I'm just going to find my wide petals. There should be 8 of them. There's my 8 wide, and I've got these thinner ones which I'm going to be placing in the gaps that I've seen on this side, just to kind of balance out the flower a little bit. And now these petals are going to go down onto the stem and up onto the flower. So let's add the next one. I'm going to add all 4. So onto the wire. I'm going to overlap that. Okay, so you can see that's been glued now onto the base, whereas you can see over here, it was glued onto that doublet paper from the center. So that's looking good. And then I'm going to go around and just add, let's see, I'm going to go now and I'm going to add 1 on this side. Flip it, whoops. Flip it over. I'm going to add 1 the opposite side. So here's my 1 wide petal. The other wide one is going opposite that. And then I'm going to fit 3 in between each of those petals. So let's go. It's really nice to add the petals this way because it helps with spacing and making sure that you can get all your petals on. So there's my one, there's two, and the third one will fit in right here. So I'm just going to take a moment and press everything down, make sure those petals are well glued. So there's my 4 done on that side, and then here's my point here with my widest ones, and I'm fitting 3 in on this side. Okay, so before I turn it over and take a look, I'm just going to make sure everything is well glued down and set down. I don't want anything shifting and moving. So just take a moment, press it down. And because we've created our center with that little hoop, or that little hook, the center is not going to be moved anywhere. So we can push down and really press those petals in without worrying about everything sliding off the wire. And there is our beautiful flower. So whilst it's not perfectly symmetrical, it does have a beautiful cohesive shaping to it. And you can now take some of these little inner petals and just really, you know, maybe shape them up a little bit and bring them close to the center, like that. Take some of these little spiky petals and sort of maneuver them in between the stamen. So it looks like they're sort of really growing out from the stamen. And then you can see too, when you look in, you can see some of the layers of those stamen in between the petals as well, which is really like in there. It's a really beautiful little detail. And so now we've got a very neat underside to our flower. And so to finish off the base of the stem, or the base of the flower, we're going to take that 1 centimeter by 20, that piece that was left over from our fold of doublette. I'm going to take some tacky glue, add a line, and then right up underneath that flower, I'm going to just place, I'll show you in a moment. So I'm just winding it around. I can even hold it like that and just wind it around. I'm not stretching it. I'm just winding it. And then when I get to a little bit left over, I'm going to keep going around. I'm using my finger there as a guide so that it doesn't go above or below my finger. And then I'm just going to sort of compact it and then bring that down. So let me just do it quickly and then I'll show you what it looks like. Pull that down a little bit. Add some tacky glue here. underneath the flower, spread it around, bring that piece up, and then just really press it against the base of that flower. So essentially what I'm doing is creating a little hip onto which we're going to place our sepal pieces. So it looks like that. So this piece now will be about 1 centimeter width by about a centimeter wide. So it's a centimeter high by a centimeter wide. And I'm just going to really compress it on there. And the flower looks absolutely gorgeous. And I'm going to just let all that set up. And then when we come back, we're going to be attaching the two sepals, the two sets of sepals. You can also add just one if you want. You don't have to do both. It's just a nice detail, especially when you create a really nice foundation like this onto which to build the underside of your flower. So I'm just really compacting it down here onto the wire and then set it aside to fully tack up. So in the next section we'll be creating the beautiful sepals. We are now ready to attach our sepals, and for that I've got my little piece of 90 gram that I stained with chalk and coated with tacky glue. I have also got some Ferns and Moss doublette, which I'm going to be using, and laminating. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use my chalk just to stain this little hip here as well, just so that when I add those the inner sepals, it sort of blends in and matches quite well. So I'm not going too crazy with this, just very simple, just adding a little bit to that hip. And then I'm just going to blend it in a little bit. So you can see a bit of the color on there. That's perfect. So now for these ones, I want a piece that is 2 centimeters tall. So I don't need very much of this paper. And then I'm going to be cutting pieces that are, let's just trim that up. It's neater. I'm going to go in with about 1 centimeter, just so I have enough space, but we want it to slightly under 1 centimeter. So there's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Create a tapered edge, and I just want to go round it at the top and then bring it down to a little bit of a curve at the end. So just a typical petal shape like that. They're not perfect. We don't need them to be. So I'm going to do these first so that it gives them a time to set up while I work on the larger sepals. And so I've got my 8 here, and I'm just going to turn them upside down so that they're ready to attach. There's not much stretch in these either, which is fine. And there's 4. Let's just turn that one over. 4, and then 1, 2, 3, and 4. So what I'm going to do is just add a little bit of tacky glue from about the midpoint down. But we just want from the midpoint. So I'm going to spread that down to the sides as well. And I'm going to place that on before it tapers down onto this. So just at 1 centimeter, I'm going to attach one of those. Let me add the other one, then I'll show you. Let's take one here. I'm placing the other one opposite. So again, just to be able to get them on evenly. Just see if it's lined up. And then just press it around so it takes the curve of that hip that you created. Just going to add a little bit more glue. And glue it down. So I'm just applying glue to the inside and then just brushing it up to make sure it's nicely stuck down. We'll shape a little bit of those at the end. So you can see they're both glued on opposite each other. And now I'm applying 3 in that section and 3 in that section. And then using my tweezers, I'm just going to, again, you should do this when it's fully dried, but I'm just going to give them each a little bit of a point. So I'm just sort of grabbing and bringing it out and grabbing it to a point, just squeezing it to a point. And you can see all of them on there. It looks very organic. It's got beautiful natural shaping, and they form nicely against the hip of the flower. So that's our inner sepals. And then I'm using my ferns and moss. I'm taking a piece that is 4 centimeters tall. So let's mark out our 4 centimeters. So that puts me to over here. And I'm going to cut a piece that is about, let's see, I'll do 8 centimeters because I am going to stretch this out. Okay, we're going to stretch it out. And I'm going to just laminate it on the side that's got the, I'm putting moss on the inside. I'm going to have the fern side showing. And just add my tacky glue. You want to laminate this well. You don't want it coming apart. Just going to glue it down well. Okay, I'm just going to fold this in half and then cut it in half. And then I'm going to fold it in half and fold it in half again. So that gives me just under 1 centimeter. Start by cutting the pointed sections at the top. So I'm going to cut down at an angle. I'm going to go around it and then cut a little bit of a tail. So on this side now I'm going up here, cutting around and then going up to a taper. So they look like a really elongated vase. And then on this one I'm just going to trim down. And then separate them. There's 4. Just cut that to a little bit more of a taper. Very much like you would do for a rose. And then the same thing on this one. Fold it in half. Fold it in half again. And it's important to have a little base at the bottom because that's what we're going to use to attach onto our wire. And I laminated it because I want a little bit more structure to these. So I'm going to just try on that little rounded section here to cup it just ever so slightly and then twist up the tops to narrow them a bit. So I'm just going to just gently try and cup. I won't go very much, and then just twist up that top section. Also, if you didn't want to do all of the, well, 2 layers of sepals, you could just create these and add them onto your flower. It will still look beautiful. Okay, so there's all 8 done. I'm going to dispense some more glue here. And we're going to now be attaching, so let's just grab one. Maybe I'll grab my widest one first. I'm going to use some glue here on that little base and then going to about 1/3 of the way up. Just like that. And now this little base attaches underneath here onto the stem. And try and angle them in between the sepal layer. So try and get them like sort of angled between 2 sepals. So I'm just going to press that on, bring that base around the stem, and then just press it onto that base. Grab another one. So we're going to do the same thing where we're adding one on opposite ends and then adding in between. So same thing, just add to that base about 1/3 of the way up. And same thing, I'm angling it between these 2 sepals. So adding that base down there. Let's get it lined up. Press it on so it takes the shape of that hip, and then press down on the wire so that it's nicely compacted. So we didn't glue it all the way up so we could pull these down at the end once they're all fully dried. So now we're going to add 3 in between. If you can't manage all of these, it's not a problem. Add as many as you can. taking a little bit of glue, I'm just going to glue that up there. Again, it sculpts it to make it look like it's all one piece. So I can see now that these are all angled in between sepals, so I can just keep moving around. So I'm just going to add some glue on here. Bring this one up in between that sepal. So I'm really now just having a look at those little green sepals, those pale green ones, and I'm just positioning these to sit in between two of them. So I can see I've got a space there between those two. And I'm just going to add my glue here. And position my last one on in between those two. And I'm just going to just take a moment, press and compact everything down. My hands are very gluey too, so I'm not going to try and touch too much. Grabbing the glue, I'm just going to add it onto the sepal, brushing down, so you won't even see each of those individually added sepal pieces. Will look like just one continuous piece, which is incredible. And it's just something I love about doublette, is that it is so sculptural. And this also is going to add a nice shine. Well, actually no, it's the Alene, so it'll be quite matte, but that's fine. So I'm not going to mess with this now because it's obviously still very, very tacky. So just to show you what that looks like, you can see these long ones are positioned in between two of those light green ones. And if any of them don't really fit, you can cut them down to fit, no problem. And then once this is set up and dried, you're going to pull those down a little bit. I noticed on some of the photos that they do tend to sit a little bit more off off the stem. So kind of like that. There's a little bit of a gap between the pale green and the darker green ones. So that's sort of the ultimate look you're going for. So I'm just going to let that really just set up well. And if I need to just sculpt a little bit, I will. Then it creates a nice seamless look. And then also with this being onto the stem now, it provides a nice opportunity to wrap the stem at the end. There's the sepals and the flower done. The next step will be on to creating some gorgeous leaf stems, which are really just going to elevate this entire stem. Okay, let's create some leaves. And for that, I've got my watercolor paper. And I'm going to, so this width now is 29.5 centimeters wide. This was from an A3 piece of paper. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark down and measure out 7.5 centimeters. That's the tallest of my leaves. So let's go 7.5. I'll actually just make it 8. Just go to 8. So I'm just going to mark off a few spots along the paper so that I can cut it off as straight as I can. Just trim that off. So I'm going to be spray painting this with my Satin Eden, and the reason that I spray paint afterwards is so that I don't have any white edges, because if I spray painted it now and then cut this out, you normally get a little white edge that you can see. So I just find it easier to create all my leaves and then I'm done. So you can create 2 of those strips if you want 2 full branches of leaves. And then my first all leaves are actually 3.5 centimeters wide. So I'm going to do about 3.5 centimeters. And then just fold it over. Just double check. Yep, it's 3.5. So that's my 2 largest leaves. Then the next 2 will also be 3.5. And then another 3.5. So these will be my bottom leaves, the next layer of leaves, the next layer. Okay, so this will be my very top of my stem. So this one was 7.5. So I'm going to measure my 7.5 and cut that off. My longest leaf, my next leaf will be 7 centimeters. So it's going shorter by 0.5 centimeter every time. So seven, then 6.5. And then 6. So this will be at the top of the stem, so we only need 1. So I'm going to cut that in half and set this one aside for another leaf stem, or you can create another single little leaf to go onto your stem as well. So there's that one. So it'll be like that. Like that. And then like that. And then I've got about 33 gauge wire here. And for my largest leaves, I'm cutting the stems to a length of 10 centimeters. So let's just get our 10. Cut them both out now. So there's 10. The next two will be 9. This wire is very fiddly, but as I said, we don't need very strong wires for this because the paper is so tough. And then the next one will be 8. And then 7. So here's one for this one. So I will show you on one, and then you can go ahead and get them all done the same way. So I'm just setting that wire aside. You're going to fold this in half. And just sort of really secure in that line. So I'm folding it one, turning it over, folding it in half that way, and then for a third time, folding it in half. And then what's going to happen is doing that is going to create like a little channel. And you can see how it's creating a little bit of a channel. And now I want to do that all the way through. And then from that side, it joins there. So it's got a continuous hole all the way through. I'm then going to take my wire. I'm going to place it in my glue. You want it to be well coated. Don't need that much on it though. And you're going to place it in all the way through to the very top. So I like to take a bit off the bottom here, place it at the top, just to close it off, put it down, and then just really secure in that wire. Okay, so yeah, just make sure it's well glued. So you're going to do the same with each of these. So it's folding it 3 times back and forth, creates a little channel, use a little awl or something and just make the channel go all the way through, and add some glue to your wire. Insert it and then glue down that paper all the way around that wire. So now what we're going to do is, I've kept the wire all the way to the top because that little tiny piece here is so small, we don't want it to break off. So I'm going in with my more detailed scissors for this, and I'm going to cut around and cut a little bit of a piece like that. So that piece is roughly 1.5 centimeters long. I'm then going to cut down at an angle. And now you can refine that a bit more if you want to. So give it a little bit more of a point. I like to just trim in as well, create these little interesting side pieces. And now I'm going to just cut a rounded section like that on both sides. And now cut down. And then I'm going to cut to the wire and then cut that off. So you'll see the wire is still coated. You've got these nice little points. Match it on that side. There you go. So I'm aiming for between 4 to 5 of these little spikes going down. So far I've got the 1, 2, and 3. And I'm cutting right to the wire to keep that vein nice and thin. So let's go to here. One, two, three, 4. And I'll do a 5th one, but I'll make it quite narrow because I want to leave a little bit here at the base to be my stem. So I'm just going to do that and then trim up and trim up. If you need to add some more glue there, do it. Put some glue over here. It's a good idea to let these just really set up first before you start trimming. And on these as well, I'll add a little bit of glue. And then just for a bit of something extra, what I like to do is just on these little pieces, I like to just cut down, create these little slits like that. They don't have to be perfect. They don't have to all be in the same spot. This one I'll just do 2. It just gives a lovely finer detail to the leaves, I think. So this is just artistic license. And because you're using the watercolor paper, it really holds up very well. So that just gives a really nice, fine looking leaf. And then once these are all cut out, I will then set them onto a little piece of polystyrene, take them outside and spray paint them front and back with my Rust-Oleum, and then come in and do a little bit of shaping. So go ahead and get all your leaves done. I'm going to keep them in height order, and then I'm going to spray paint them, and when we come back they'll all be done, and we're just going to be assembling our leaf stem. My leaves have been sprayed up, so I literally just kept them on this little piece of foam, and I just sort of angled them and sprayed them, and they turned out really, really beautifully. So those two little 6 centimeter leaves, I'm going to use one for my leaf stem and one I'll attach either a little bit further up the stem or a little bit further down. But there's my top leaf, and then there's my next two, and then the next two, and the largest ones. I really just love the details, and I love just those little cuts that were in the paper that just gives it a really beautiful sort of airy kind of look and adds a bit of volume to these leaves. I've got a little piece here of some doublette in the ferns and moss. I'll be using the fern side to be showing. I've got this little piece of the 33 gauge wire left, which I'm going to be using to wrap my leaves on. I'm not too worried about the length of it right now. So I'm just going to outstretch just use a little bit of doublette. I'm just going to add this wire. So my little piece here that I had at the bottom has torn off, but it's not a problem. I'm just going to attach this wire just from right underneath where that leaf ends and just wrap down. I'm going to wrap to where this little stem ends. So it's right there. And then at that point, I'm going to add my next two. Flip it over. Add this one. I'm going to wrap down again to where these wires end. Just over there. I'm going to add my next two. So I'm just going to wrap around once and then add my second leaf. And then wrap down to where these stems end. I'll break that off there so I can just use a new piece of doublette. So adding these wires is adding a bit of structure to the central stem or the main stem. So I'm just going to grab some tacky glue on there as well, and I can go in and add. So there's no real measuring out needing to be done because you'll just add these leaves where that little bit of paper ends. So it's your bit of a guide. Flip it around. Add the second one. And then I'm going to wrap down to where these stems end. So all three stems end right here. And then I'm just going to leave this little section here now to add like that, attach it to my flower stem. So there's your beautiful leaf stem. And now what you can do is just sort of bend it, because these wires are so thin, you can really bend them and get them to be in a nice organic shape, not all the same way. Have them sort of coming up more as well, and then bending down, some bending back. So you can really just shape them up beautifully. And once that's done, you just let them tack up really well. I'm going to grab my little pliers here and I'm just going to cut a section off. And there's your beautiful leaf stem, and with another little leaf to add. So you can look now at our stem and just see how beautiful the leaf is on that stem. It just gives such a lovely finish to your flower. Grab some doublets. Also, if you've got a piece here of the 4 centimeter piece that we did our little sepals with, you can just take a piece and cut up. We don't need much at all. I'm just going to apply that glue and fold it in half to give it a bit of structure. And what you're going to do is just cut a very tiny little triangle. There's one, as fine as you can manage. Just like that. And we're going to add that to the top of our stem. So let's just set that aside for the time being. I've got my crepe tape. I'm just going to fold this in half as well, because I want to cut it a little bit finer. You can use floral tape for this as well. And another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of this 18 gauge and I'm going to add it here. So I'm just going to thicken up that stem a little bit to add a bit more structure. Okay. So I'm going to hold it here against the base, right underneath there. Let's set all these other components aside for the time being. Let's get some tacky glue. Okay. So I'm going to start by just adding some tacky glue to my floral stem. I'm going to just add the tape on, going from that part that we ended with the sepals, and just wrap down. So once I am about 3 centimeters down, I'm going to take this little piece here and glue it in. Just going to add it right there and glue it on. Actually, I think it should be a little bit higher up. So I would work on about 1.5 centimeters. So I'm going to unwrap a bit more. It's right up close underneath the flower. So about 1.5 centimeters. Add that little piece, wrap down. I'm now going to wrap down about 3 centimeters. So now where these 2 wires are lying next to each other, I'm going to take my little stem and I'm going to sit that wire right into between those 2 wires. And keep wrapping down. About 4 centimeters now from that part. Let's meet over here. And so this leaf is now standing on that side. I'm going to flip it over. And again, between those 2 wires, I'm going to add my large leaf stem. And I'm just going to keep wrapping down. And then go right down to the very tip of your stem and just wrap over those ends a little bit. Then you can bring that down, angle it out a little bit. And then what I am going to do is taking some of this glue. I'm going to add glue in at that join to create a more natural finish. And also this will help secure that stem as well. Keep it nice and secure. I'll do the same for this one. So you can't even tell that you added a second wire, but the stem now is quite nice and firm. So now you can sort of bend it up a little bit however you want to display your cosmos. I'm just going to let that tack up for a moment. But I mean, the flower looks absolutely stunning. And I love these delicate leaves. I think with the spray paint on as well, looks really quite beautiful and has a nice bit of a sheen, which is a lovely contrast to the petals. I think the last thing I would do is just spray with some preservation spray. You can see just how beautiful the back looks as well. Just all the details. So if you ever wanted to know how many flowers it takes to get a design right, for me this is just a small glimpse as to how many I've created in order to get to a final design. Each one slightly different, each one slightly elevated, but it takes a lot of practice. It takes a lot of just trial and error, especially when you're working off photographs online. But the finished stems have all dried up beautifully. They have been sprayed with a preservation spray. So this was my first one. You can see a little leaf that was added underneath the sepal design. I used tacky glue on this one, so you can see it's got a bit of a sheen to it, but it sets up really, really well. And the leaves move as well. If you just sort of tap the stem, the leaves have a lovely bit of movement to them, and that's creating 2 leaf stems, whereas the one in the class, we just created the 1 leaf stem with a smaller little stem here at the top. But there's a little leaf that we added right at the top of the flower. So you can see already just the sepal on this one, how much more elevated it is from my prototype. A lot more refined. And I just think the details on it are exquisite. You know, you can go in and just shape up the leaves a little bit. And the more you kind of move them around, the more natural they look. And you can shape up your stem as well. On these other ones, I mean, every single attempt has yielded a different color result. I definitely think the color achieved in the class, this one here is the best. I like it the most actually. But they've all come out very different. This one as well. And on this one, they all look, I mean, I just think all the differences just give it that very natural, realistic look. And on some of them as well, I've just done a single sepal. So like on this one, it's just one sepal. I haven't got the two, but you can see it looks just as good. So if you wanted to just simplify it even further, you can just add one sepal and not add the lighter green ones. And then for also a bit of variety, this one still has to be completed, but this is just the center ruffle, not strips 2 and 3 added. You could put a sepal onto here as well, just to create a sort of more opening flower. And then this one has got the inner petal strip 1 and petal strip 2, also to create sort of more of a budding flower. So you can create like that as well. You can just tweak the design so that when you add them all together, it just gives a lovely bit of a contrast, especially this one having more of the color on it. It just complements the arrangement so well. But yes, our final design, I think it was really fun painting technique using markers and rubbing alcohol. It's definitely something I want to experiment more with going forward. And it was a lot of fun, a lot of trial and error. But and then obviously a lot of artistic license used in it, but that's the joy that we have as artists. So there are the beautiful Double Click Bicolour Cosmos, and I hope that you enjoyed the various techniques used, like creating the center, which is a wonderful technique for using lots of different field flowers. They have these like daisies and things like that you could use the center for, and obviously just cutting petals in a different way, and creating a lot of interest and a lot of movement with just using petal strips, which are generally quite static, but we can sort of cut and shape them in a way that makes them quite dynamic on the stem. And then using watercolor paper for the leaves as well, just something different. And I love experimenting with different papers, and I just love the difference between the look of the leaves and the petals. They're not all crepe paper. There's doublette, there is 90 gram, there is watercolor paper. So it's just lovely when there's a variety of papers being used, but all together they look absolutely gorgeous. And just with the class with making the eyeballs, I think just adding an eye. So I've got this little half one here that I created just using a half polystyrene ball. Using that as flower centers, you could just sort of do something like that. You could create this all in black. It could be quite dynamic and quite striking. So I hope that you had fun this month with these classes, and there's just something interesting and new techniques that you've learned, and at the end of it to create some really stunning cosmos.